First, before we move on to some of the day's news, I just want you to react to what you saw there in Becky Johnson's report, the pressures on ambulance services in Becky's report and all across the country.
I mean, that picture that you just painted of what's happening in Coventry, I recognise absolutely from my own constituency in Wigan, and I think most people will in every part of the country now. It is completely unsustainable, the pressure that the government is piling on to our health service, particularly the A&E, which is the warning light that flashes on the dashboard when the system isn't working. It's clear to everybody that we've got to get more people working in our National Health Service. We've got to increase the capacity of the staff who are burnt out and exhausted. We've got to reform GP services, primary care services, so that fewer people are going into our A&Es. And we've got to really start to get a grip, hopefully a cross-party grip, on social care in order to get more people out and home and into the community where they can recover. The government has set their face against that this week. They've said that the universities have to cap the number of medical school places. We think that's unconscionable at a time when most health trusts are dealing with this sort of crisis.
Yeah, and you say they're increasing staff and the other points that you made, but no mention there of increasing money. Would a Labour government increase the amount of money going into the health service?
Well, we've already said that we would end non-dom tax status and increase the number of people coming into the National Health Service, the biggest expansion in workforce in recent decades. We think that's a significant contribution to helping ease the pressures in the National Health Service. And we've been unapologetic about the fact that the NHS has been, for a long time, our crown jewel, but it's not working and it needs reform. And particularly the parts that need reform are the front door of the National Health Service, the numbers of people coming through into our hospitals because they can't get treatment elsewhere, and the back door as well, the number of people who are stuck in hospital because they can't get out.
That non-dom status reform is going to be a couple of £1 billion, isn't it? I mean, would a Labour government increase taxes to help fund the NHS and social care?
We don't think there's any way that you can argue that working people in this country can pay more taxes. At the moment, the tax burden is at the highest rate for decades. People are struggling with a cost of living crisis. The Tories crashed the economy. Inflation has gone through the roof. The idea that you would raise taxes on people at this stage is for the birds. But what you can do is make fairer choices. And we've tried to set that out so far through our non-dom tax status, funding and expansion of the NHS workforce, and through taxes like the windfall tax to get money back into people's pockets. One of the things that I was told in my local hospital last week is that some of the people who they're struggling to discharge, who are medically fit to go home but need more care. It's not just a lack of social care, it's the fact that they're going home to cold homes without food in the cupboards. That's just unbelievable in this country, one of the wealthiest countries in the world in the 21st century. And we've got to start dealing with the wider crisis that exists and relieve the pressure on the National Health Service.
OK, listen, Nandy, just away from the health service then, but still about those kind of choices that can be made. You'll know the Convention of the North, of course, is taking place right now. What would a Labour government do to make sure that places like your constituency, places in the north of England, get more funding?
Look, every problem that we've got, whether it's the crisis in funding our public services, whether it's the energy revolution that we're living through, trying to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, all of the problems that Britain faces come down to one thing. We've had very low, sluggish economic growth over the last decade because we've written off the assets and potential in most parts of the country. I'm going to tell the convention today that we can't go on like this, that our political system has to change or die. We can't continue with this absurd system where ministers sit behind desks in Whitehall and hand little bits of our money back to us in the north of England for traffic light improvements and picnic areas to be expanded. We need to get serious about growing every part of our economy. Hydrogen in Ellesmere Port, wind in Grimsby. There is huge potential across this country to get every part of the country able to make their full contribution. Again, instead, for too long, this government has written people off and written them out of the national story because of where they live. And we believe that that's got to change.
So, I mean, you've called the levelling up a bidding process like the Hunger Games. I mean, would the Labour government have set amounts for each region that they could then draw on as if they were government departments?
Well, we believe that there needs to be far more flexibility in the budgets that councils and mayors already have, because it's absurd that you've got a system at the moment where they're having to go and bid to dozens of different government departments to drive growth and build resilient local economies. It just doesn't work. I mean, to give you one of the most absurd examples, if you want money for buses, you have to go to one department. If you want money for bus charging points, you have to go to another. We don't think you should reform that system. We think you should end that system and put power and resources into local hands in those communities so that they can drive growth and align national budgets behind them. We think we can be far more ambitious. And today, what you'll hear from 1,000 business, civic and political leaders gathering across the North is us speaking with one voice to say we need a government that matches our ambition.
And Lisa, Nandy, finally, while I do have you, I do want to ask you a question about something that happened last week in Parliament. You will have seen the exchanges involving Rosie Duffield and Lloyd Russell Moyle. I mean, did you witness that? And what did you think of what you saw in Parliament?
I wasn't there, but I've seen the clips of the shouting and the heckling. I mean, this was not Parliament's finest hour, but I think there's a wider point, actually. This is a debate that needs far more light and far less heat. And I think it's extraordinary that you've got people, Labour members of Parliament, this time shouting each other down when this is a debate that has a lot of nuance in it and people need to be heard. There's a lot of concern out in the country about it and we need to calm down. We need to remember that the people that we're talking about are human beings and we need to have a far more respectful and far more decent debate. And I would say that to all of my colleagues.
Yeah, I'm sure that everyone would agree that it needs to calm down somewhat. Do you think an apology is due from Mr Russell Moyle to Rosie Duffield?
Well, look, I wasn't there. I know what I saw on the clips, and I think if Rosie was being shouted at, which it certainly looked like she was, then yeah, of course, I think you should apologise for shouting at other members of Parliament in a debate. But like I say, I've only seen the clips, so I don't know what else was going on in there. I think that's definitely a matter for the Speaker. I think he takes very seriously the fact that we've got to show the best of the political system to the country, and that day clearly we didn't. But I do think there's a wider point here as well. When I look at the way that this debate is conducted, particularly in relation to trans people, I think when we look back in history, we'll be thoroughly ashamed of the way that we allowed this to be reduced to questions of people's body parts when we're talking about human beings, and some of the more hysterical arguments that are being propagated, particularly on social media. I don't think Rosie Duffield was doing that. I think she was contributing to a debate. I think she deserved to be heard. I think all people who contribute to that debate deserve to be heard. But I think it's a symbol of where we've got to in this country with this debate, that we've lost the ability to listen to one another, to understand one another. And in the end, it's not politicians who suffer for that. It's some of the most marginalised, discriminated against people in the country.
OK, Lisa Nandy, appreciate your time this morning. Lisa Nandy, Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, thank you.